Welcome back. Today we're making this adorable koala cake. It is equal parts cute and delicious. It's made with 3 6-inch black cocoa cake layers and they bake up pretty flat, but I still like to level them just to make this cake easier to assemble. I like to use a serrated knife just to trim off the tops, and also as an added bonus, you can snack on the cake tops while you make the cake. I always like to do one more pass across the cake layers just to make sure that all those excess crumbs kind of get scraped off and don't fall into our frosting. As you can see, these cake layers are so moist and have such an amazing texture. And now it's time to actually assemble our cake. I like to spread out some buttercream on my cake board just to help lock that bottom cake layer in place. And I always take a second to make sure my cake layer is centered. Then it's time to start spreading our frosting onto our cake layer. So this gray buttercream is actually naturally colored, and I used a tiny bit of black cocoa in the frosting as well to give it this color. So I'm spreading a thick, even layer of buttercream on each cake layer. And whenever I'm making a layer cake, I always like to make sure my cake layers are lined, and I also like to press down on the cake layers just to make sure that there isn't any excess air trapped between the cake layers and the frosting. So I spread out my second layer of frosting, and then I'm adding my top cake layer upside down just to make it easier to frost and minimize crumbing. These cake layers are at room temperature and they were not chilled, so you can see that they're sliding a tiny bit. Usually I like to work with chilled cake layers because it's easier, but these ones were room temp, so I'm just using a really gentle touch as I spread my frosting to create my crumb coat. So I'm covering my cake layers in a thin layer of buttercream to trap in those pesky crumbs, and once I've done as good of a job as I can with my large offset spatula, I use my bench scraper to get my crumb coat super smooth. Then it's time to use our small offset spatula to clean up that edge and pull any excess frosting on the top into the center and off of the cake. I chilled the cake for about 10 minutes in the freezer until the frosting was firm to the touch, and then I set to work adding on my second layer of buttercream. Now, since we are covering this cake with buttercream fur, the second layer of frosting isn't really 100% necessary. You could probably add it onto your crumb coat and you'd be fine. I just really love to have full coverage before I pipe on fur, so I decided to add a second layer. Once I had smoothed my frosting and cleaned up those top edges, it was time to add on our fondant face. I did chill the cake one more time before adding in the ears, which I highly recommend because it makes it so much easier to have them stay in place. After adding the ears, I then added the koala's face, which included its really cute nose, eyes, and mouth. Then it was time to cover this entire cake with buttercream fur. I'm using a small wilted grass tip here. It doesn't have a number, but if you search for a wilted grass tip, it will be the first thing to pop up. And I'm taking my time literally covering the entire cake and the ears with this buttercream fur. You definitely want to take breaks as you're doing this because your hand's going to get tired, and also the heat from your hands can transfer into the frosting and cause it to change colors. So there's no harm in taking a little break. I'm not going to lie, when I first added on the fondant ears and face, I was like, what did I just create? But it looked so cute in the end, and I was so happy with the way it turned out. If you want to make this koala cake at home, the recipe is up on Chelsweets.com, and it's also linked in the video description. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it, and until next time, happy baking!